All right. Can everyone hear us okay? Hi, everyone. I'm Nicola from Mathspace. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. And thank you. I've seen there's a few people who've come to some of our other webinars. So thank you. Hello again, and thanks for joining us again. We're joined by Christina and Linda from Visions in Education School in California. Thank you so much for joining us, Christina and Linda.
Thanks for having us.
And we should be saying good morning, good afternoon, and good evening because we have teachers from all over the world joining us. So hi to everyone on the call. Today will be run by Christina and Linda, but I'm just going to run through a couple of quick housekeeping things before I hand over. First thing is that we are recording the session, so don't worry about writing notes or taking screenshots. We'll be sending you the recording and all of the slides tomorrow. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out is there are two icons at the bottom of your Zoom screen, which I wanted you to pay attention to. So we have the Q&A icon at the bottom there, and that is where you should send through any questions. So if you have questions for Christina and Linda as they're talking, pop them into the Q&A. Q&A is being run by our team, so Daniel and Rhonda, who you can also see on the call there. And we'll be saving all of the questions until the end, and then we'll run live Q&A at the end. There's also a chat icon, and that's where I can see lots of people have already been using it. It's where you can chat to everybody else on the call. So just when you go into the chat box and it pops up, make sure you select all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see what you're saying. All right, that's it from me. I'm going to switch off and I'll jump back on at the end. I'll hand over to you, Christina and Linda.
All right, thank you very much. Let me do my little thing on my end. All right, so thank you very much, Nicola, for inviting us, Mathspace for inviting us to share. Linda and I have been working in a virtual environment for a very long time, so we really care about supporting the whole student and really trying to diminish isolation and online learning because, you know, virtual learning can be very passive. So we're super excited to share what we've learned. But before we do that, what we'd like to do is, hey, let's find out where you're from. So I am here in Elk Grove, California. It's right outside of Sacramento. I'm sure we've got people from all over the world joining us. So go ahead and use the chat and let us know where you're at. Linda, where are you coming in from?
I am in Grass Valley, California, and that's in the foothills.
Foothills above Sacramento. Hey, is it sunny up there?
Yeah, kind of. Sometimes.
It's going to rain this weekend, so that'll be very interesting. But let's see what we got going on here. Let me open the chat really quick. Okay, we've got California, Virginia, Stockton, New York. We got some Australian, lots of, let's see,
New Jersey.
Oh, Weed, California. Hey, that's my bestie. Hey, Sandy. Anyway, lots of people joining us right now. We're super excited to share. And hopefully we can, you know, provide you guys with some things that we went through in the 10 years that we've been doing this, but to kind of share what we know. So, all right, let's get started. Sometimes these controls, they like you to either touch it or click forward. So let me give you a little bit of information about our school. We are a charter school located in Sacramento, California, Visions in Education. We are a non-site-based charter, so all of our students work from home and our teachers service those students in those communities. So we do have virtual learning set up for our students so they can work in their space. It started in 1999, so we're actually on our 20th year. We have grades TK through 12, and we actually serve about 6,500 students. Linda and I work for one of the programs within Visions in Education, which is the University Prep Academy. We have actually been supporting virtual learning for 10 years, right? Yeah. And if we could go back and tell ourselves some things, oh, we would be there in a heartbeat. But absolutely. Our expertise is in grades 9 through 12, but a lot of what we use is good for virtual learning as a whole, even for lower grade levels. But we do focus on meeting A to G for our students. A lot of our students are focused on moving on to university. So we take learning in a virtual environment very seriously because we want it to be a viable option for our students and we want them to be engaged in their learning. So let's go ahead and do a poll right now because I can imagine that we have educators from the whole spectrum of learning. So let's find out. We're going to do a poll. Let's find out who's elementary, who's high school. You should see a poll on your screen right now. Go ahead and click in there and let's see where you're at. Oh, we got lots of high school teachers right now. Some administrators, elementary. I kind of thought we might get some parents in here. I haven't seen a parent yet. College. Oh, there's one. I guess actually now, Linda, right? As educators, we're all parents doing this too at home, right?
Yep.
So there you go.
Yeah.
College is also moving into this realm. So, but majority are, looks like high school. So thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share those results. So you can kind of see what we've got. Big percentage of high school teachers. So what we have to share,
Them well.
you out a lot. All right. Thank you very much for sharing that. So let's go ahead and start with your role as a teacher.
Okay, so your role as a teacher in a virtual environment is different than that in a classroom environment. You have a lot of different things that you need to do to support your students, and the first starts out with being a guide. So as a guide, you want to be able to onboard all the things that you can possibly think of at the beginning of each week. So we suggest that you do things like a Zoom meeting like this, or Screencastify, or Google Hangouts, things of that nature, even Google Docs, where you can help the students understand what they need to do for the week, and then also clarify instructions for maybe bigger projects. If you onboard well, you're gonna do well. So
And
the more you do it.
The funny thing about onboarding is that even though we've been doing this for 10 years, it's only been the last 2 years that this has made sense to us. So we slow everything down to onboard because then that helps us be more successful as teachers.
Absolutely. It was a little bit, you know, kind of on and off there before that, but we got it down now. The other is that you want to be a mentor to your students. So yes, you're definitely interested in them academically, but you also have to understand your students emotionally and socially, because you need to be there to help them in whatever it is that's going on with them, especially in these times now with the COVID-19 and all of that. There's a lot of uncertainty. So you want to be like that solid place for them and to be able to help them understand where they're at and help them if you have to with their assignments. You're also a policy maker. So as a policy maker, you set norms, procedures, expectations. You definitely want to have expectations. Just don't think too high, right? It's really important that you're realistic with it. And then you are going to also be a monitor. So this person's just making sure that the students are doing their work, making any kind of adjustments that you might have to make as you go through the week. You never know what's going to come up. And if something happens, you need to be sensitive to that and help your students so that they don't just shut down completely. We'd rather have some movement than no movement at all. And then go ahead.
A super important thing here as a monitor is that when you are adjusting for students, that you're doing it at an individualized level. I think that's one of the things that we enjoy most about our jobs, is that we can actually approach a student in this environment to support the student where they're at. So give them resources they need. So you really have to look at it as an individual student rather than as a whole, like you might be able to do in a classroom because they're all together. But really individualized support is really powerful in virtual learning.
It is. Thank you, Christy. And then also you are the driver. So you're the one that's able to downshift when needed. So part of that's with the individualization that Christy was talking about. But also maybe just things are moving a little too fast and you just got to slow it down, or something's happened and you have to help fix that. You need to be flexible and you need to adapt to your students.
So the next part we want to talk about is making sure that you take care of yourself. So sometimes as educators, we give 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and especially when it's really busy, usually at the beginning of the year, after breaks. This is no different. You're going to have situations where you too now are a homeschool parent. Maybe you've got your kids at home. Like, how am I going to do this as a teacher, do my job? And then I also have to support my own students at home. So it's okay for you to take care of your family. It's okay to be there for your family, but figure out what your class time is and make sure that you, second bullet there, put boundaries around your class time. So this took us a little while to figure out, but we got to a point where we let students know that they need to contact teachers before 4:30. So it's important for teachers to know, especially in this environment where your day really can be 24 hours. It can go from 8 o'clock until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes students are night owls and they'll be up at midnight and they're texting
Sometimes.
work.
Sometimes.
And well, of course, not sometimes, a lot of times. So it's important to make sure that if you have boundaries, we always say a really good block for school and virtual learning. We tell our students 10 to 2 is a really good solid block to be doing their work. They should be contacting you within that time. You have boundaries on when you get to or get a hold of them after that time if they happen to contact you. The other thing is giving yourself some grace. Like, this is not an easy venture to pull off in the span of 3 weeks. I mean, we've been doing it for 10 years, and I think the last 3 years for us has felt really good. We have really figured some things out. So just understand, give yourself some grace. When we first started this 10 years ago, we thought we had it made. There were myself and 4 other teachers, and we thought, oh, 9th grade, we're going to do project-based learning. We're going to do inquiry-based learning. This is going to be fantastic. 2 weeks into the school year, it fell apart because we didn't realize 9th graders don't like to find the answers in a whole bunch of web pages in inquiry-based learning. So while we thought it was a great opportunity for them to learn, they needed it to be way more structured, and we had to do a flip. And in 4 weeks, we were totally restructured. But we have done a lot of fail and then start again, fail, start again. So just give yourself that grace and just know that it's going to take some time. Another really important thing is to make sure that you have a community of other educators, other people who've done this before, so that you can bounce ideas off of. I don't know how many times, Linda, do we get together, like all of us, the whole faculty. We've got 23 teachers in university prep, and we're constantly, contacting each other with ideas or issues or how do we solve that? Because in isolation, just like our students, it's super hard to problem solve sometimes. It takes us longer. So find a community that you can really go to with some of these issues. And the last bullet, super important, less is better. We have great ideas, and it's important that you're learning something new or you're trying out something new, that you start with something that can help you be successful. So I give the example here for elementary school teachers. I know you guys have lots of things that you're working on, but ELA and math might need to be the focus right now. Another trap sometimes is like all of this ed tech that we can do, all these great things, there's so many things. You have to remember, on the flip side of that, you're managing student accounts. So when a student can't remember how to get in, when they've lost their password, so when Linda talked about norms, like how do you help students with how should they sign up for accounts so that you can help support them when they can't get in? So we always tell our students to use their student ID as a password, and we tell them to use their username that we give them as their account, or their Gmail account that we give them. So less is better. Don't go all out. You're going to find some things that work, some things that don't, but it's okay to start small and grow from that.
And also one other thing, Christy, like don't think that your kids, just because they're teenagers, are super tech savvy. There's a lot of kids that are just not as familiar with all of this as we might think. And it is, you know, it can really cause obstacles for you.
And that's something we say a lot in virtual learning, at least in university prep, is if it's going to create an obstacle, then we need to figure out how to fix that before we give it to students. Because once it is an obstacle, they shut down and they have a hard time moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about how students show up in a virtual world. Now, when we started, you know, I've been with Visions now for almost 20 years, and I started as a teacher. And students, they have intentions, they have good intentions, they have plans that they make. They don't always follow through on those plans. So it's super important to understand that you're not just supporting a student getting something done. You got to remember, students are not hardwired to know how to manage time, communicate, create space for learning, or even teach themselves. So a lot of our primary focus for students is actually, how do I manage time? And that is, if a student is not being successful, almost 99% of the time it's because they're not sure how to manage time. They have a plan, it's in their head. The problem with it being in their head, they can't follow it. So we work very hard to recognize that students don't make good decisions, and that part of our job as guides, right, is to make sure we're building up those skills for them to be successful self-directed learners. So, you know, communication is another one. They like to use caps when they email us, and we might interpret that.
Stop screaming at us.
Yeah, exactly. At us. But you got to understand, they don't know. They're just not ready for that. So be patient with them. A big one, and we get this a lot when students come into our world, you know, they've had maybe not a great experience with a teacher somewhere else. Yeah. And so they apply that.
Happens a lot.
Right, Linda? So we have to talk to them about, you know, it's our job to show up and be there for them. But it's fearful. It's a scary thing for a student to bother a teacher outside of the school day. And now if you think about your learning environment, you're outside of the school day every day because students are at home now. So being really aware of the fact that if a student contacts you, be careful what your first reaction is. We have students, sometimes we're trying to get a hold of them for 3-4 weeks. If your response, once they finally pick up that phone call or they finally call you back, is, oh my gosh, where have you been? This is ridiculous. You can't redo any of this work. You have just really crushed that student now. That student took a risk. So be really careful about how you show up. This is why it's so important to create that relationship of trust.
Don't close any doors.
What's that, Linda?
Don't close any doors.
Don't close any doors. That's very good advice. Do not close any doors. The other big thing with students in a virtual world is the work has to be manageable. You can imagine even a 9th grader who has 10 things that they have to do in a day. If it's a lot of work, if it's above, like sometimes we say, oh, it's an 8-hour class day or an 8-hour school day. That's also an 8-hour I'm at home day. It's not. You got to remember, when they come to school, there's lots of transition. So we really like to work on a 4 to 5 hour solid block. And that's a good time for them to focus on their work, but make sure that it's manageable. If it's too much, students, they have affective filters. And as educators, we've been trained to be aware of it. It goes up. And when it goes up and you're not there at home to help them, they have a really hard time moving through that. So make sure you're mindful of how much work you're assigning, and then also what's the age of these students. And then, like Linda had mentioned earlier, sometimes we think of students in this world and they're tech savvy, they know how to figure everything out.
They don't.
It's not the case.
Especially not with time management. I work with student services mostly, and I work with kids who need help with their time management. And usually you'll see that they think more about the big picture. Like, I have that whole week's worth of stuff to do, instead of thinking like, well, I don't want you to think of that. I want you to think of, I have this one day of things to do. And if they focus on that, then it seems like it's doable. Otherwise, it's pretty overwhelming.
Definitely. So just give them that space and know that you need to show up to, provide those basic supports for them. Creating systems. We knew this when we started this 10 years ago, but it is so important now. If you're lucky enough to have a landing place for students, you might have an LMS already. That might be Schoology, Edmodo, Google Classroom, Synergy, School Loop. We happen to use something called a GradPoint, which is part of Pearson's digital curriculum. But if you don't have something like that, it would be a really, really beneficial for your parents and your students to make something like that. This is in our archives. This is 9 years old.
This is our original landing page.
This is our original landing page, what we started with. Like, we had a Google Doc that we shared every week with our students, and it basically mapped out everything they did every day with all the information they needed, with all the links. So make sure your students have a place to start, and that's where they're going to start to do all of their work. The other thing is you got to make it clear about how a student's going to contact you, how a parent is going to contact you. I know sometimes it's like, oh gosh, I don't want to give out my phone number, but unfortunately that's what we do. We hand out our cell phone numbers to our families and our students because we need them to contact us when they need help. So you've got to be available. So this happens.
You can connect the Google phone. Make a Google phone number.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So if you're worried about handing out your cell phone number, you can attach it to a Google number and then give the Google number out, and that will ring through your phone. So you're right, Linda. Thanks for reminding me about that. This actually is one of the email signatures from one of our teachers, and you can see here it gets busy, but basically what she doesn't have to worry about now is at any point in time, her students and her parents can find out what's going on. So they know her basic contact information. They know what hours she's available for open office or by appointment. She has her meeting schedule there, teacher directory. All of our teachers also like to put a little meme at the bottom, inspirational quotes. They change them up every couple of weeks, and sometimes they'll offer extra credit for students to actually get them to go into this and use it.
I like the funny ones.
The puppy ones, you love those?
The funny ones. If it's funny, it's all about me.
Yes. Something else that's important is making sure that you have a master calendar that you can share with your families and your students. When you're setting up a lot of virtual meetings or one-on-one meetings, it can get messy, and who's remembering, when do I have to go to that one? When do I have to go to this one? So our teachers, we're lucky because we're a Google school. So if you're a Google school, use a Google Calendar, set up a calendar to share with your students and put all the meetings on there so they don't have to look for it.
Do it for the whole semester.
Do it for the whole semester. Our teachers do that. They send out all the invites to the students, and they also send it to the parents so everybody knows what's going on, and we don't miss anybody. Another thing, we talked a little bit about time management, how important it is. Every Monday, our students have to take a picture of what they're going to do for the week, but creating a daily planner for students is super important. If they have one, maybe you gave them a paper one, they can take a picture of that and send it to you. That's what we have our students do. This happens to be a Google sheet, and it's an e-planner that students fill out. You may think, oh, well, students can do this on their own. They can't, so there is some modeling. Some of them can, most of them can't.
You have to teach them how.
You have to teach them how to do it. So having a planner is super important to help students be successful.
I like the Google Planner because then I can check to see if their work is done, and I don't have to rely on them telling me that, yeah, I did my work, because most of the time, yeah, I did my work is I didn't do all my work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So other things that we use to support our students are one-to-one meetings. These we can do by phone, and that would be like chat, or text, or just through calling, although you'll probably never get a hold of a teenager through calling. You've got to text them. And then we do a lot of virtual, tons of virtual actually. And we've used Google Hangouts for the most part, but we're moving to Zoom now. It just has so many more things that we can use that makes our whole experience better, and that for our students as well. And then we use things like Google Chat, which is kind of like that IM messaging type of thing. kids will do that too as well. So we use these one-on-one meetings to preview the week's assignments, to check in with students to see what's going on. And that's super important right now with everything that's going on with COVID and the like. And then we also do things like provide tutoring. So this is a great place to really start to build that relationship. The next thing we do is we have weekly check-ins, and they're in all of our assignments. We have a class called advocacy, and in there our students at the beginning of each week have to answer this form. This is a Google form where it just talks about, you know, what their grades are, how many things they have to do on their to-do list. And then we have a question that they ask. This one says, what are your plans this summer? But our teachers change them all the time. And they want it to be, you know, relevant to what's happening with the students now. And students share a lot through the weekly check-ins, so they're super important. We also do it for parents and guardians. This, we kind of make sure that they understand or they're aware of their students' grades each week, and they have places here to do questions or concerns. And then all of the information goes down to Google spreadsheet, so you get it really quick. You don't have to go and open each form, and you can answer questions from that.
And the super important thing about this is that it's a one place where you can get all that information. And we cannot stress enough how important it is to develop that relationship, not just with the student, but also with the parent, because it's like a triangle, right? Your student is at home, you're off site, but the parent is home. So the parent is there to provide some of that. Parents are going through things too. So providing this opportunity, it's a non-invasive way for them to share some things that might be going on, so that you can get kind of an idea to do a follow-up call right away to provide additional support if necessary.
Mm-hmm. We learn too, a lot of times if someone's having problems with a subject, maybe they won't reach out to the content teacher, but they write that they're having trouble. And then their mentor teacher knows to let their content teacher know. So we put them in connection with the teacher so they can get extra tutoring. When you do meetings, no matter what kind of meeting it is, you want to make sure that you establish norms, especially for the virtual meetings. So in the virtual meetings, I really want that to be a safe environment for my students. So I have them always be respectful in the way that they act towards each other and the way they speak towards each other. I'm an American government teacher, so I always tell them, you know, you have the right to say whatever you want, but you have to say it in a way that doesn't hurt anybody. You must be respectful of each other. Also, we usually have them turn their microphones off because we don't want them interjecting at any time. And then we have them turn their microphones on at specific times, and we tell them. Again, we want them to be dressed for school. It's good just to put them in the sense that they're not always just at home. When they get dressed, they're at school, but we also don't want to see anybody, you know, shirtless, or, you know, boys shirtless or anything like that, or the jammies, or maybe their hair is crazy. I don't know. We just want them to be dressed appropriately for school. And then also the videos, we normally have their videos off. But in groups, you can do videos on as long as they're aware that they're on. Then also, when you're establishing norms, it's really important that you get the students to cooperate in creating those norms. So you're going to have certain things that they can't do, but then you can say, you can work together to make them. That way you have some leverage later on. If something starts to get a little wacky, you're like, hey, we created these norms together. We all agreed on this. So let's get back to it. And that works out really well. This is also a great place to work for building trust and for individualizing learning, right? So anytime you have a meeting with the student, the more you learn about them, the stronger your relationship will be. And then I always like to, if I learn things about my kids, I kind of write it down, and the next time I see them, I might bring it up, something that they talked about. And then they feel like, oh, wow, she loves me, which I do, but I don't always remember everything without writing it down.
And to kind of go back to the be dressed, it is hard for students, because you can imagine, we talk a lot with our students about the importance of developing structure in their day, because it can turn into school 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, especially if they're not doing any work. So while they're not doing any work, they're still stressing about it. It's still there. So that's why we establish start and end times, like have a start and end time, have it be the same every single day. Get dressed, find a space to go to. It's your kitchen table. It's this one chair. That's where I sit, and that's where I know I'm doing work for the next 4 hours or whatever it is. But that be dressed thing is super important, because I have a 14-year-old here who's been in the same clothes for the last 3 days. So it's important, right, for us to make sure that they are taking care of themselves and actually, getting dressed every day so that they can be ready to do school. So just super important. It helps create that structure for students.
Okay, class meetings. Class meetings are great. This is where students have the chance to engage. And some things that we do with class meetings are novel discussions, math talks. You can share in current events, observe science experiments. As I said, was an American government teacher. I did debates with my students, and we did presidential campaigns where they did political ads and speeches and things like that. Just a lot of really cool things that kids can do together and work through things together as well. Then also, there's places that you can create to interact, so students can interact with other students. One of the things we use is Flipgrid. Flipgrid's super easy to use. Each of the boxes represents a 45-minute, ooh, right, that would be long, 45-second segment. And basically this is a class where kids do these cool projects and they're talking about their projects. So we have, people doing music production, there's scrapbookers, photography, oil painting, and then they can even comment or like each other's Flipgrid, and they do this once every month. And so it kind of, builds that culture for that class, which we all want to do, is build culture for our classes.
Yeah, and so, oh, wait a second. Oh, wrong way. I did get permission to share one of these from one of our students, and it just an opportunity for a student to share. Oh my gosh, when we saw this, we were blown away. But for her,
it's amazing.
She kind of was feeling down in the dumps, and she shared this, and the reaction she's gotten since sharing it has really helped her.
I'm Angelica, and for the project, I'm doing immersive painting, but also like art in general. So I haven't been working on the painting because instead I've been doing a portrait all this time. It's of my grandmother when she was younger. This is the photo. And this is the portrait so far. I'm doing it for her birthday, so I have to finish it soon. It's a little hard to see. It's very reflective, but yeah, let me see if I can try to show you guys some of the details. But something interesting is that the reason why I'm drawing left to right is because I'm right-handed, and if I started drawing something on the right here, but then I went to draw something on the left, I would smudge everything on the right because graphite smudges very easily. So yeah, that's it.
So
Angelica, and for
a great opportunity for students to be able to share what they're working on, and it's really 45 seconds it seems like a really short time. It's not, but we say 30 seconds is too short, but 45 seconds is a pretty good sharing speed for our students.
Okay. And then also, you want to make sure that we're being mindful of the attention span, right? 60-minute lesson is way too long. So when you're doing a virtual meeting, if you're going to do any type of direct instruction, you want to keep that like at 15 minutes or less. So teenagers have a short attention span. In the virtual world, it's even shorter. And they could, maybe be doing something else. So you got to keep it short and sweet, and then get them to do their work as well. And just remember also that students have other work to do. So we definitely, you want to be mindful of that. If they have 6 or 7 classes, you don't want them working, for 10 hours in a day. So, you want to shorten that up some. And then also we have students using this time to virtual classes, I should say, as a flipped classroom. So we send information out to them. Maybe they send a video or links to go research things, and then they bring that information back to them. So it's more like they're running the class more than you are.
And I think that's the biggest thing about, remember we talked a little bit about passive learning. You know, virtual learning can be very passive. So we've got to create these opportunities. So in our world where we don't have the opportunity to have class time, like we don't get class space every single day. So when we do get time to be in class space, we really cherish it as the opportunity to get students to learn from each other. So really this opportunity to flip the classroom, even though you're not in a classroom, use that time to really engage students in learning, engage them in understanding how other students approach something or their take on it, but let those students also build relationship with each other. Super important to use that time, is very precious because you don't get a lot of face-to-face time in virtual space.
Yeah. Okay, and then also for direct instruction, we like to do it in an asynchronous way. So we use things like Screencastify, which is a video, or we use VoiceThread, which is audio. We prefer Screencastify because video is just nicer, right? They can see you, you can move through the assignment, and you can show them what you're doing. And we use that to preview the week's assignments and give detailed instructions for projects. This saves you from having to repeat that, but also it helps to encourage students to actually try something that they might be a little worried about, like that giant project staring at them, right? And if you have all the instructions set out for them, that they can go back and review it, they're going to do better.
And there's something to be said about, like, we already know students do not read more than 3 sentences on the page. We've done this for 10 years, and what we know is if you have too many written instructions, they get lost. So no matter how many times you try and put over time you teach them how to make sure they're using their skills to go through the information and disseminate what they need to find so they can know what to do. Recording instruction is super important because then you're giving them, you're modeling for them, but they can look at it on their time and they can go back and review it if they need to come back to it. And then, Linda, were you going to talk a little bit about putting this on the landing page also?
Yes, yeah, you definitely want to have it on the landing page. So, and shared with students and the parents. Because remember, parents are working with their kids. They kind of might want to know what to do, right? So we definitely want to share it with them too. And if it's on the landing page, it's easy to find.
Right, easy to find. So this is what, probably 8 years old, I think.
Look how cute she looks.
Oh my gosh, back in the day. But we had some issues with some lab materials and kids weren't sure what they were supposed to do. So I used the Screencastify. It wasn't back then because we didn't have Screencastify, but I basically recorded myself doing this activity and then I put it up.
So hopefully it'll show
and had students do the activity with me through video.
The idea is that cold water is heavier than hot water. So when I pour the blue water in, I should get a concentration of blue water down here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is slowly pour it down the side because I don't want it to mix. So when I pour it down, you can actually see the green water at the bottom and the yellow water still.
So the nice thing here is this is 9 years old and my earth science teacher still uses the recording in her class because, you know, students they're confused. Okay, I got all these tablets. I got this water. What is cold water? What is hot water? It's easier to do this kind of instruction and share it with them so they can still get the basic idea of learning. It's observation, right? So have that opportunity for them to do that on their own. And then when they come together in a classroom, you can actually engage with them a little bit differently.
All right, and then these are a bunch of things that you can use online. We use You Can Book Me. They're 20-minute individual appointments and kids can go in and choose. You can set out your time. You can do up to 3 of them at a time. So a kid could actually have an hour appointment with you. The math and science simulations are very cool because it shows how things are working, especially in the science. Gizmos is one, and PhET simulations is another. Any kind of whiteboard is great. This particular one is a Zeitboard, and the students can write on it. The free version doesn't have a lot of options. It's not expensive if it's something that you think you might want to purchase, but there's a bunch of whiteboards out there, so you really don't have to worry too much about purchasing it. Using speech to text or text to speech is super important to do there also, especially for kids that have learning disabilities or hearing or seeing issues, or they can't write very well, or however, maybe they're not fast typers. So it's nice that they can do things with the text, speech to text. It types things out for you, and then text to speech reads it for you.
Sorry about that. I set it all up to be seamless. So the last thing we want to talk about is parent guardian support. Because like I mentioned earlier, students are at home. So it's super important to make sure parents are also engaged in what's going on for students. I get, I do get a lot of, comments from parents saying, oh, well, I'm trying to teach my student to be an individual and they're going to be an adult soon and they need to work on this. And that's not the case. Students still need that guidance. They need to look at their schedule, and if it's not realistic, they need someone at home to help them fix that. And then we're also providing that support. But when you're working in a virtual environment, the parent becomes a very, very important resource for you. So weekly communication is important, but I've heard from a lot of my friends who've gotten over 30 emails from different teachers who are working with their kids. And that can be really overwhelming for a parent. Well, who am I supposed to, where am I, what, how? So we talk about creating that one page, like we have an update page. And when we make changes, that goes on the update page and we share that with our teachers every week. And teachers do the same thing. Here's all the stuff that's going on. Here's the update. That way parents are getting it in one spot and they can go to it. They're not relying on you to send it out. Another one is providing a virtual meeting for parents to ask questions. Sometimes this feels a little like scary because you're opening yourself up, but parents are worried. They want to know what's going on. They want to, it's important to meet with them and see what are their concerns. What do they not have? You might not even be thinking about it and they bring it up and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Thank you very much for bringing that up, but giving them that opportunity to see you and talk to you real time, and more than just one, have a group of parents. You might even do this every couple of, in the beginning, maybe you're doing it every month, or maybe you're doing it every couple of weeks, but you're giving them that opportunity to come in and ask some questions. Just to remember, parents, guardians are like your teacher aide, right? So if they're at home, right, provide the resources. Exactly. Provide the resources so they can support their students. I'll never forget when my daughter Emma brought home her math and we were having to divide and multiply using arrays. I thought I was going to lose my mind because there was no instruction. I couldn't do it with her, and I was as frustrated at 7 o'clock at night. So make sure you're providing the teacher instructions also. It's just, it helps them keep their affective filters down low also, so they can support students.
That could be an answer key too. Answer key. They don't have time to go look for it.
That's right. Creating a Q&A doc, right? So you might come across some frequently asked questions as you're checking in with parents, and you create that doc and you answer those questions on that doc. Put it on your update page so that every time a new one comes in, you can add it. Make sure your parents have one place to go so that they can feel like they're getting the answers they need. Because there's nothing worse than a parent who is trying to figure it out. And I actually saw something on Facebook, and it's probably circulating around, but it really talks about needed ink to print this out, couldn't print it out, had to go get ink, couldn't get a hold of the teacher. That can ruin a whole day of learning for a student.
And you don't want to lose the parents' buy-in either, right?
No,
you want them. You want them to back you up and support you, and in order to be able to support the student. And if you turn the parent away, then it really causes issues. Kind of a losing battle there.
Exactly. And so, and also too, especially now with COVID-19, you got to remember parents have got their own stress going on right now. Some parents, they both have lost their job right now. So I talk a lot with my teachers about what it means to show compassion and to, you know, recognize other people's vulnerability. You know, when a parent is stressed out, show up as somebody who's there to problem solve with them, not to add to the stress. I mean, you can imagine, and they may not even be sharing that with you. We have situations all the time where student hasn't done any work for 3 weeks and we're trying to figure out what's going on. Come to find out someone died in the family and it was traumatic. Nobody let us know. So letting us know allows us to show up and figure out how can we problem solve for that point. So the student doesn't, because when a student gets behind, that's all they feel is that they're behind and they're trying to catch up. And that causes that affective filter to go up and they just shut down. It makes it super hard for them to be successful. Trying to be available as quickly as possible to answer questions or concerns. You know, we do a 24-hour turnaround because we are busy, but you know, holding to that is super important because there's nothing worse than somebody waiting 3 days. If you make someone wait for 3 days and they needed it now, that's going to add their anger and their stress is going to elevate every time they're waiting for it. So just being really mindful of showing up as quickly as possible. And this again is that Q&A, super important resource. Maybe you've got an answer, you put it on there. It'll benefit you in the long run to make sure that you can get to your parents as quickly as possible. But you know,
Uploading
time, 24 hours, that's a pretty good time range to use. And then Linda had brought this up earlier, but be willing. I know with teachers, we tend to be we're proprietary, you know, it's like hours, right? Proprietary, sorry, can't get the word out. But you've got to be willing to share. If you're not willing to share your answers and it's math, do the odd problems for students so they have the answer. I mean, parents don't normally sit there and say, here are the answers to your homework, get it all done. It's not usually the case. So just remember, a parent is at home trying to do this with you. So be mindful about providing stuff that they can answer or that you're willing to share with them so that they can be a help and a support for students.
Yeah, it's frustrating too for students if they don't know if they're doing something right. So they could be spending hours doing something and then have done it wrong the whole time. So having the answer key, the parents having the answer key really makes kind of stops that anyway.
Exactly. All right, so now that we've been with you for a little over 45 minutes, we'd like to do another poll and let's see how you feel about going virtual. You've got 4 choices here. I'm gonna rock this. It's new, but I think I can do it. I'm still scared to death and you've gotta be kidding me. So where are people at? Ooh, I like it. I like it. My favorite is I'm gonna rock this. My favorite.
That's my favorite too.
My favorite quote is, it's fun to do the impossible. That's from Walt Disney. And I love the opportunity to try and change something up. So it's good. Most of you look like you're ready to rock it. It's new, but you think you can do it. And we think you can do it. It's super exciting. I'm going to go ahead and share the results so that you guys can see what's going on here. Good job. We're ready to do this. And then we just want to say thank you for attending our session. It's a real privilege to be able to share this and our experience. And we're hoping that we gave you guys some tips and tricks that will help you in your journey through virtual learning.
Thank you so much, Christina and Linda. We've got lots of good Q&A here. Well, questions at the moment, not the A yet. Okay, I'm going to go through them. We've grouped them by category. So first, a couple of questions about your role as virtual teachers. Lots of questions about what does onboarding mean for students?
Oh, onboarding is front loading, right? Mm-hmm. So basically, if I'm going to onboard a class, we'll just use one class for right now. I would first look at everything that's due that week, and then I would go through that with the kids. Like this is, you know, we're going to be doing lessons and it's all concerning whatever topic it is. You're going to have a post test with this. We're going to do a discussion. And then if there's a project, then I'm going to give detailed instructions for the project on that. So the student can always go back to my Screencastify or however I decided to do it. And they can see what they need to do in that class for that week, what the project entails, and how to get a hold of me. I always include that.
And additionally to that, onboarding also, because you will probably be introducing a lot of technology or tools or things students have never used before, you've got to take the time to make sure they know how to do it. So that would be a great idea to do a virtual class through Zoom so that you're modeling it for them. So you're showing them how to do that. We, next year, we're looking to use Mathspace. So we're going to take a lot of time that first month that we're working with those students to make sure they know how to log in. What does it look like? How does navigation work? So that's kind of the onboarding, is just really making sure students know exactly where they're going with whatever task you've given them to do for that week.
And how to use it. Yep.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Next one here. This is a good one. How do you manage individual student needs when you have, say, more than 100 students?
Well, Linda, you had a lot of kids in your American government class. How did that work?
Well, basically, I would at first look at grades, right? So not so much grades, but whether students are turning in work. The ones that I'm turning in work, I know that there's something going on, right? They're either not doing it for whatever reason, but most of the time it's because they don't understand something. So I would reach out to those students. So that's a really good place to look first. Other things you can do is if you know that your student needs to have a text-to-speech, you make sure that they have that available to them and you teach them how to use it. So you want to make sure that all the resources that they need that will help them is there. We put in all of our like IEP information, and 504 information is loaded in GradPoint, our LMS that we use. So it's easier, and we flag the student. So we know which students need modifications or need some kind of help.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Okay, now we've got some questions around, I guess around supporting students in a virtual world and creating systems with students. So first one here, how long should one-to-one meetings run for?
Remember, we talked about attention span for students, right? So I would say, Linda, I would say like 20 minutes is a really good time frame to check in with students. Because the other thing too is, like, if you have 20, 30 students and you want to do check-ins during the week, you don't want your whole week to be taken up by 1 hour long check-ins. So really being able to do short 20 minutes. I do it with my teachers. Like every learning period, I try and do 20-minute chunks, check-ins, and have an agenda ready for the students so that you're not like trying to figure out what to talk about. Sometimes it's the same agenda. I create a Google Doc with, it's for teachers, but I create a Google Doc and then I use that as a running agenda every time I have a one-on-one meeting with a student. So if there was something previously, when I have my next meeting, I can touch on that again and make sure or follow up to check on them. But I would say 20 minutes is probably a substantial amount of time for a student one-on-one.
Okay.
For a check-in, for sure.
Yeah, for a check-in.
Okay. What does a manageable workload look like for a 13-year-old, say, to compare with like a 17-year-old?
Oh no, now you're talking about middle school. This is like a whole new right now. Because it's interesting because we try and make sure that our students we sometimes the 12th graders have a larger load because of the class that they're in. They could be in integrated 3, they could be in calculus or chemistry or physics. So typically, I think this is where for middle school and elementary, like I think it's important to really figure out like what are the important things. Like right now for middle school students is how do you bridge them with English and math? to next year because they're going to be going to high school. And so can you use the other subjects like social studies and history to, you know, be there and be exploratory or investigatory or group run type of activities so that you can put a little bit more effort into the English and the math so that you are bridging. So I think that's, you know, we try and look at like one lesson a day, which the lesson can be between 30 minutes and 40 minutes.
Per class.
Yeah, per class. We try and stick to like about 40 minutes per class. Our average is like 5 hours per day for students is what we tell them, but sometimes it's more like between 4 and 5. So it just really depends, you know, make sure if we have students doing a large project for that class, we actually won't assign anything but the project. So the project is the only thing that they're working on for the whole entire week. So we kind of break it up that way also.
Also, if the kids have difficult subjects or honors classes, it's going to take longer. Yeah. Because those classes just require more. So maybe you're going to look more like 5 to 7 hours for them.
Okay. This is the direct question. I feel like it's so easy for students to fall through the cracks with digital learning. How do you stop this from happening?
So what we have is we're structured in such a way that every student has a mentor teacher assigned to them. So that mentor teacher is the one who is really checking up on their progress continually. So every week they're aware of where the student is at, what's going on. They're making that parent communication. And then our students also have content teachers that they're working with. That mentor teacher works with the content teachers a lot of the time to give information or provide that bridge, because we talked about communication where students don't communicate well. They don't know that they need help, or they don't reach out for help because they're worried about it. And because it can be passive, it is a responsibility for the teacher to really show up to provide that bridge and reach out. So we just had a chat from one of our teachers, Jolyn Gralty, and the mentor teacher is basically a homeroom teacher, like advisory. So if you have that in place already, it's important to like continue that. Let those kids come together and check in with that teacher who has that relationship, but have someone who's primarily kind of monitoring the whole student and then checking in with the rest of the teachers at the same time.
Okay. Do you have students that don't have internet access? No.
No, because 10 years ago when we started this, we built a one-to-one program, and then we also recognized the internet problem. So we're fortunate enough that we actually can provide students with that if they are free and reduced lunch. That is an issue. A lot of times it's not as simple, and I'm glad someone brought this up, because right now Comcast, AT&T, they're all saying, oh, free internet. That process to get internet sometimes is hard. So when a parent is trying to navigate that with the other stresses that are going on, sometimes a teacher needs to step in and help them go through that process to get it all set up. And if it's not happening, because we're in this situation, like this is where schools need to step up and start saying, what do we need to do? The hard thing for a teacher to do is, how do I manage a paper world and a digital learning world? Because that makes it really hard for teachers to figure that out. So it's really, really important that the school as a whole is trying to get kids connected to internet, especially if they're going to go into a digital format to do learning. So that we're fortunate. We don't have to worry about that. We do have to worry about internet right now is slowing down for a lot of kids because a lot of people are using it. So again, it's reducing back the work, right? You know, taking some things off and adjusting as we need to during this time.
Okay, we've got only a couple more questions here. All right. Oh yeah, there were a few questions around the template that you spoke about for the weekly student check-ins. Can we share that with everyone on the call?
You mean the Google form?
Yeah, the Google form.
The student check-ins. Yeah,
definitely. That was actually, my teachers use that. That was one of my teachers who shared it with me. But yes, I will definitely put together some kind of shareable form and we'll link it into the presentation so people have an example that they can work from.
Great.
Copy.
That's great. Thank you.
Steal it.
Sorry.
Steal it.
Okay, this is the last question. this is a really great question. I think it's a really great way to wrap up. What's the biggest piece of advice that you have for teachers as they embark on distance learning for the first time?
Oh, don't overreach.
Yeah.
Do not. You are not going to be great at it at first. You're going to let yourself fail, right? Like one of our teachers says, fail first attempt in learning, right? So don't be afraid to try things, and just don't expect too much right out of the bat. It'd be really frustrating if you, you know, just said, oh, I'm going to be able to do this and it's no problem. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even though we've been doing this for 10 years, next year we are doing a big shift because we do want to move away from that passive learning and more towards active learning. And it's going to be a big shift in thought for us. And it's funny, something I've been telling our faculty right now is, guys, I don't want to bite off more than we can chew because we got to go slow to get good at what we're trying to do. So I think the interesting thing that educators find themselves in right now, the situation is they're being asked to do a monumental shift. And then what does that mean next year? Are they going to go back to the classroom, or is some of this going to go with you? So, I think it's important to ask as a faculty, as a school, like, are there some elements of this that we like? And if there are, then invest in those elements and make those work really well, because nothing is worse than investing a lot of time and effort into something and then having it be nothing next year. So I think it's like Linda said, just don't overreach. Really understand what your purpose is. Like I said earlier, if your focus has to be ELA and math, that might be what it has to be. And the other things, science and social study are still important, but you got to prioritize in this time because we only have a few weeks left in the spring semester.
Linda and Christina, thank you so much. I feel like it's a big responsibility to thank you on behalf of everyone who attended, because that was just so good. You're both so supportive and uplifting at the same time. I think it was Laura Lee, forgive me if it wasn't you, Laura Lee, but somebody wrote in capitals, "This has been amazing." I think that was just the perfect way of describing what this session has been like. So again, very much.
Thank you for inviting us, because I think sometimes when you work in a virtual learning environment, there are those fears, like how are they successful? Like, it isn't us just sitting behind a computer, like checking in every once in a while. Like, we've worked really hard at this and we are happy to share. So again, we'll share this presentation. We'll make sure we have some resources and hopefully this helps people transition in a good way.
So for people who are still on the call, we have been chatting early stage chats with Christina and Linda about a potential follow-up webinar. We've got some cool ideas, so we will keep you posted once we've formalized those ideas. And also just a reminder that we have recorded the session. We'll be sending out the recording, the link to the PowerPoint presentation, as well as the link to that Google form that lots of people asked for. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. And have a good night. And have a good day in Australia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.